What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses walks into what she thinks is a standard late-night interview, only to find herself face-to-face with a host who seems determined to tear her down on live television? Tonight, we're diving into the shocking confrontation that left Emily Blunt walking off the Jimmy Kimmel show. And trust me, what you're about to hear will change everything you think you know about what really goes on behind those bright studio lights. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this story gets more intense with every single detail. The atmosphere in the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio was electric that Tuesday evening. Emily Blunt, radiant in a stunning emerald dress that perfectly complemented her striking features, settled into the guest chair with her trademark gracious smile. The audience was buzzing with excitement, phones already recording in anticipation of what they expected to be another delightful interview with one of their favorite stars. Emily had been making the rounds promoting her latest film, and every appearance had been nothing short of charming and engaging. She crossed her legs elegantly, adjusted her posture, and flashed that warm smile that had captivated audiences worldwide. Jimmy Kimmel emerged from behind his desk with what appeared to be his usual jovial demeanor, but there was something different in his eyes tonight. Something sharper, more calculated. As he approached Emily for the customary greeting, his smile seemed forced, almost predatory. The studio audience cheered enthusiastically, completely unaware of the tension that was already beginning to simmer beneath the surface. Emily stood to embrace the host, maintaining her professional composure, but those closest to the stage later reported that they could see a flicker of confusion cross her face during that initial interaction. As they both took their seats, Jimmy shuffled through his note cards with an unusual intensity. His usual pre-interview banter with the audience felt rushed, almost dismissive. Emily noticed the shift immediately. Having done hundreds of interviews throughout her career, she had developed an acute sense for reading the room, and something about this particular room felt off. The cameras rolled, the red recording lights illuminated, and what should have been a routine promotional interview was about to become something entirely different. Jimmy leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from his trademark grin to something more serious, more probing. "So, Emily," he began, his voice carrying an edge that wasn't present in his usual interviews, "let's talk about your latest movie. I have to say, after watching it, I found myself wondering if you're starting to phone it in these days." The comment hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. The audience fell silent, unsure if this was some kind of setup for a joke that hadn't landed yet. Emily's eyebrows raised slightly, her smile faltering for just a moment before she recovered her composure. "I'm sorry, what exactly do you mean by that?" Emily responded, her British accent lending an air of dignified confusion to her words. She tilted her head slightly, genuinely trying to understand where this unexpected hostility was coming from. This wasn't the Jimmy Kimmel she had met backstage, the one who had complimented her dress and asked about her children. This was someone else entirely, someone who seemed intent on creating conflict where none should exist. Jimmy's response was swift and cutting. "Well, I mean, let's be honest here. Your last few performances have felt pretty safe, pretty predictable. It's like you found your comfort zone and decided to just stay there. Don't you think your fans deserve more effort?" His words were delivered with a casual cruelty that made several audience members shift uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the playful ribbing that late-night television was known for. This felt personal, targeted, and completely inappropriate. Emily's professional mask began to slip, revealing the first glimpses of genuine anger beneath her polished exterior. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and her hands, which had been resting casually in her lap, now gripped the arms of her chair. "Jimmy, I have to say I'm quite surprised by this line of questioning. I put everything I have into every single role I take on. To suggest otherwise is not only inaccurate but frankly insulting." Her voice remained controlled, but there was steel beneath the silk now, a warning that this was not a conversation she was prepared to tolerate much longer. The host seemed to feed off her discomfort, his smile growing wider and more malicious. "Oh, come on, Emily, don't be so sensitive. I'm just asking the questions that everyone's thinking. Your husband is John Krasinski, right? The guy behind all those big blockbuster hits? Must be nice having someone else do the heavy lifting while you coast on his success." The studio fell into complete silence. Even the camera operators seemed stunned by the audacity of what they had just witnessed. This wasn't journalism. This wasn't entertainment. This was character assassination disguised as interview technique. Emily's composure finally cracked, and the fire that had been building behind her eyes now blazed openly. She sat forward in her chair, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet tone that somehow carried more power than any shout could have managed. "Excuse me? Did you just suggest that my career success is somehow dependent on my husband? That everything I've worked for, every role I've earned, every accolade I've received is because of someone else's achievements?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as Emily's anger became palpable. Jimmy, clearly enjoying the reaction he had provoked, doubled down on his attack. "I'm just saying, it's interesting how your biggest successes seem to align pretty closely with his career trajectory. A Quiet Place, for instance. That was his baby, wasn't it? You were just along for the ride." His words were like gasoline on a fire, and the audience could sense that something explosive was building. Several people in the front rows were now visibly uncomfortable, some even starting to boo softly at Jimmy's increasingly inappropriate behavior. Emily stood up from her chair with the grace of someone who had reached their absolute limit. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the full weight of her classically trained theatrical background. "How dare you sit there and diminish my work, my talent, and my contributions to my own career? A Quiet Place wasn't just John's vision. It was our collaboration. But beyond that, my body of work speaks for itself. The Devil Wears Prada, Edge of Tomorrow, Mary Poppins Returns. These weren't charity cases or nepotism projects. These were roles I earned through talent, hard work, and dedication to my craft." The host seemed momentarily taken aback by the passion in her response, but he recovered quickly, his media training kicking in as he attempted to regain control of the situation. "Look, I'm not trying to attack you personally, Emily. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation about the industry and how connections can sometimes matter more than talent." His attempt at backpedaling was transparent and weak, and it only served to fuel Emily's righteous anger further. "Honest conversation?" Emily's laugh was sharp and humorless. "There's nothing honest about what you're doing right now, Jimmy. This isn't journalism. This isn't entertainment. This is you attempting to humiliate a guest on your show for reasons I cannot begin to fathom. You invited me here under the pretense of discussing my work, and instead you've chosen to launch personal attacks and spread insinuations that have no basis in reality." The audience was now fully on Emily's side, with audible murmurs of disapproval directed at their host. Jimmy's producers were frantically trying to signal from off-camera, but he seemed determined to continue down this destructive path. "Emily, I think you're overreacting here. This is just how these interviews go sometimes. If you can't handle a little tough questioning, maybe you're in the wrong business." His condescending tone was the final straw, and Emily's eyes flashed with a fury that would have made her most intimidating film characters proud. "Tough questioning?" Emily's voice rose slightly, though she maintained perfect articulation despite her anger. "Tough questioning would be asking me about my preparation process, about the challenges of certain roles, about my upcoming projects. What you're doing is creating a hostile environment designed to make me look bad for your own entertainment. This isn't journalism, Jimmy. This is bullying with cameras." Her words cut through the studio like a blade, and even Jimmy's perpetual smile began to waver under the intensity of her gaze. The host made one final attempt to justify his behavior, but his voice lacked the conviction it had carried earlier. I'm just trying to get real answers, Emily. Our audience deserves authenticity, not just the same polished promotional talking points they hear everywhere else. But Emily was already reaching for her microphone, her movements deliberate and decisive. The entire studio held its breath as she carefully removed the small device and placed it on the side table next to her chair. Your audience deserves better than watching you attempt to tear down someone who came here in good faith, Emily said, her voice now carrying the full authority of someone who had made her decision and would not be swayed. They deserve entertainment that doesn't come at the expense of human dignity. And I deserve better than to sit here and be insulted by someone who clearly has his own agenda that has nothing to do with honest conversation or professional interviewing. Jimmy's facade finally began to crumble as he realized the interview was spiraling completely out of his control. His usual quick wit seemed to desert him as he fumbled for words that might somehow salvage the situation. Emily, please, let's just take a step back here. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Why don't we start over and talk about what you really came here to discuss? But his attempt at reconciliation rang hollow after the venom he had already unleashed, and Emily's expression made it clear that there would be no going back. Start over? Emily's voice carried a note of incredulous disbelief. Jimmy, you don't get to spend 15 minutes attacking my character, my marriage, and my professional integrity, and then suddenly decide you want a do-over. That's not how respect works, and it's certainly not how professional interviews are conducted. You've shown your true colors tonight, and I think everyone in this room, including your audience at home, has seen exactly what kind of person you really are when the cameras are rolling. The host's desperation was now visible to everyone in the studio. His hands were fidgeting with his note cards. His usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled from running his fingers through it, and beads of sweat were becoming apparent under the hot studio lights. Look, Emily, I may have pushed a little too hard with some of my questions, but that's just my interviewing style. It's nothing personal. Can't we just continue with the show? His voice had lost all its earlier confidence and aggression, replaced by the pleading tone of someone who knew they had made a terrible mistake. Emily gathered her purse with deliberate slowness, each movement calculated to convey her complete dismissal of his pathetic attempts at damage control. Your interviewing style? Jimmy, what you've done here tonight isn't a style. It's a character flaw. It's the behavior of someone who thinks that tearing others down somehow builds themselves up. I've been in this industry for over 2 decades, and I've never encountered such unprofessional, disrespectful treatment from any interviewer, regardless of their so-called style. The audience began to applaud as Emily stood, their support for her position unmistakable. Several people in the front rows were now openly expressing their disapproval of Jimmy's behavior, with calls of, "Apologize to her," and "This isn't right," clearly audible despite the studio's acoustics. Jimmy looked out at his own audience turning against him, his face growing pale as the reality of what he had done began to sink in. This wasn't just a bad interview, this was a career-defining moment that would follow him for years to come. Emily, please, Jimmy tried one last time, his voice now carrying genuine panic. I think there's been a misunderstanding here. I never meant to offend you or make you uncomfortable. Can't we just finish the interview and move past this? But Emily was already walking toward the edge of the stage, her posture radiating dignity and determination. She paused at the top of the steps leading down from the interview area and turned back to face him one final time. Jimmy, the only misunderstanding here is your belief that you could treat me this way and somehow get away with it. I came here as your guest, with respect for you and your show, and you chose to abuse that respect for your own twisted entertainment. I won't be part of whatever game you're playing, and I certainly won't sit here and pretend that what you've done is acceptable in any way, shape, or form. Her words carried across the silent studio with crystal clarity, ensuring that every person present understood exactly what had transpired. As Emily descended the steps and walked toward the studio exit, the audience erupted in sustained applause, many people rising to their feet to show their support for her decision. Jimmy sat frozen in his chair, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly as he struggled to process what had just happened. His producers were frantically signaling for a commercial break, but the damage was already done. The entire confrontation had been broadcast live, and there was no taking back what the world had just witnessed. Emily paused at the studio door, her hand on the handle, and looked back one final time. "I hope your ratings were worth it, Jimmy, because this is the last time you'll ever have the opportunity to treat a guest this way on my watch." With that, she pushed through the door and disappeared into the corridor beyond, leaving behind a studio full of stunned silence, broken only by the continued applause of an audience who had just witnessed something unprecedented in late-night television history. The show that was supposed to showcase her latest project had instead become a masterclass in dignity under fire and a cautionary tale about the abuse of power in the entertainment industry. So what did you think about Emily Blunt's powerful stand against disrespectful treatment? Make sure to subscribe for more incredible Hollywood stories and comment below with your thoughts on whether she handled this situation perfectly or if there was something else she could have done.